Okay, Houda, you could
Mhm.
start. Yes.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to a new Quran study. And God willing, we're gonna read from Surah 21, the Prophets, and we're gonna start from verse 37. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Um, I can hear my voice. Can you please mute? Oh, thank you. Verse 37. The human being is impatient by nature. I will inevitably show you my signs. Do not be in such a hurry. The challenge: where is that retribution if you are truthful? If only those who disbelieve could envision themselves when they try to ward off the fire off their faces and their backs, no one will help them then. Indeed, it will come to them suddenly, and they will be utterly stunned. They can neither avoid it, nor can they receive any respite. Messengers before you have been ridiculed, and consequently those who ridiculed them incurred the retribution for their ridiculing. So here in this verse, in previous verse, God mentioned that the human being tend to be impatient by nature, and specifically when it comes to believing in God's signs and messages. Um, so we need to trust in God's timing and not rush things, knowing that His signs will be revealed in specific and predetermined times by God's leave. Um, then the verse addresses those who challenge the truthfulness of God's warnings and retributions by asking the messenger, "Where is the punishment you speak of? If you are truthful." So this challenge, reflects the doubt and disbelieving on the truth that can lead, to severe consequences, both in this life and in the hereafter, as God mentioned. And then the verse describe, the regret and the panic that the disbelievers, will experience when they are suddenly confronted with the reality of God's punishment. And that's a reminder for us of the importance of reflecting on God's message, and also our actions and being prepared, to be held accountable for them. Um, and then also the verse mentions, the fate of those who mocked and ridiculed previous messages of God. And, it warns that just as those who ridiculed before, faced consequences for their actions. So the same fate, waits those who mock and reject the messages of the current messengers. Um, Overall, this verses teaches us to treat, God's messages with, seriousness, respect, and reverence, in order to save ourselves, from, terrible consequences. 42. Priority is confused. Say, who can protect you from the most gracious during the night or during the day? Indeed, they are totally oblivious to the message of their Lord. Do they have gods who can protect them from us? They cannot even help themselves, nor can they accompany one another when they are summoned to face us. Um, so here, God talks about people who, confuse their priorities, by worshiping false gods instead of relying and worshiping the most gracious God. And so he asked them, who can protect people from the most gracious God during the day or the night? So here it shows that those false gods are unable to offer any protection or any help, even to themselves or to each other. So that's why God encouraged us to reflect on our beliefs and priorities, reminding us of the greatness of God, in our lives, and at the same time showing the foolishness, of worshiping anything, besides Him. 44. We have provided for these people and their ancestors up until an old age. Do they not see that every day on earth brings them closer to the end? Can they reverse this process? MashaAllah, this is very important verse. We see here in this verse, the question, whether people realize that each passing day brings them closer to the end of their lives, shows the inevitability, inevitability of death, you know. So, um, there is no ability to reverse the aging process or prolonging life. So as we see, despite the human being researches in this area, to find ways to make human beings live longer, you know, but it's not really achievable because it's God's system and design, to live our lives that are um, predetermined by God for a specific purpose. So that's why it's so important to appreciate, the blessings of each day and to prepare for the eventual end of life because it's gonna come to pass sooner or later. Um, Next verse 45. Say, I'm warning you in accordance with divine inspiration. However, the deaf cannot hear the call when they are warned. When a symbol of your Lord's retribution afflicts them, they readily say, we were indeed wicked. We will establish the scales of justice on the day of resurrection. No soul will suffer the least injustice. Even the equivalent of a mustard seed will be accounted for. We are the most efficient reckoners. So this verse, warn people based on God's inspiration, but some, people ignore, the warning because they are deaf. Deaf. So that's because God, blocked them because we know that, when a person choose to reject, God's messages, in first place, God helps them, help that person in his way. So he blocked them. And as a consequence, he cannot hear or understand anymore, the message. So when, they experience, even a small taste of God's punishment, they admit they were wrong. This shows that on the day of judgment, everyone will be judged, fairly, because God, um, will provide a perfect justice on that day. Um, 48. Prophets Moses and Aaron. We gave Moses and Aaron the um, the statute book, a beacon and a reminder for the righteous, the ones who reverence the Lord even when alone in their privacy, and they worry about the hour. This too is a blessed reminder that we sent down. Are you denying it? Uh, so as we see here in these verses, God is talking about, the book given to Moses and his brother Aaron. Um, he described it as a guidance, that serve as a reminder for the righteous and the reverent people. Um, and then, the verse reaffirms that this Quran is also, a blessed reminder from God, that we can take heed from it as well. 51. Abraham. Before that, we granted Abraham his guidance and understanding, for we were fully aware of him. And the footnotes says, was Abraham so smart as to discover God, or did God grant him the intelligence because he knew that he deserved to be saved? As it turns out, this whole world was created to redeem those among us who deserve redemption. When the angels suggested that all the rebels, humans and jinns, must be banished out of God's kingdom, I know what you do not know. Verse Surah 2, verse 30. At the same time, this war proves Satan's incompetence as a god. Appendix 7. So, as we see, on the footnotes, God said to the angels, "I know what you do not know," and that indicates, that God's wisdom and knowledge is beyond human understanding. So he knows, who deserve to be saved based on that. He gave intelligence and understanding to people who deserve it to enable them to discover and understand God's guidance. So that's the case, with the prophet Abraham, and the same with any sincere believer. And that's why, we are here as, we learn from the message, and it's God's plan, for his redemptions to his, sincere people. Um, the intelligence, that God gave to Abraham, allow him to start questioning things around him, specifically to question, the beliefs of his people, and to advocate, the monotheism. That's what we will see, in the next verses. God willing, I'm gonna read 52. He said to his father and his people, "What are these statues to which you are devoting yourselves?" They said, We found our parents worshipping them. He said, indeed, you and your parents have gone totally astray. They said, are you telling us the truth, or are you playing? He said, your only Lord is the Lord of the heavens and the earth, who created them. This is the testimony to which I bear witness. So, in these verses, we see that Abraham questions, his father and his people about, their worship of the statues. So they explain, that they are following, the tradition of their parents. And then Abraham, responds by saying they are all misguided. Um, so he affirms that, the true Lord is the creator of the heavens and the earth. And this, shows Abraham's rejection of idol worship. I'm gonna continue reading, inshallah. I swear by God, I have a plan to deal with your statues as soon as you leave. He broke them into pieces, except for a big one, that they may refer to it. They said, whoever did this to our gods is really a transgressor. They said, we heard a youth threaten them. He's called Abraham. They said, bring him before the eyes of all the people, that they may bear witness. They said, did you do this to our gods, O Abraham? Abraham proves his point. He said, it is that big one who did it. Go ask them if they can speak. They were taken back and said to themselves, indeed, you are the ones who have been transgressing. Yet they reverted to their old ideas. You know full well that this cannot speak. He said, do you then worship beside God what possesses no power to benefit you or harm you? You have incurred shame by worshipping idols beside God. Do you not understand? So, as we see here, Abraham has a plan, to deal with his people, status. So the first thing, Abraham he waits for his people, to leave before executing his plan, so he can carry out his plan without interference or, any detection. And then by breaking, the statues into pieces, Abraham symbolically, challenges the belief in idol worship, to prove, the foolishness of worshipping lifeless objects that serve as a powerful statement against idolatry. Then Abraham intentionally leaves the largest statue to allow him to provoke, more discussion and reflection among his people. So when his people find out, what happened, he was accused of breaking the statues. And Abraham cleverly, suggesting that the big statue who did it. And this smart move keeps him safe from getting in trouble right away. And it also makes his people realize how silly it is to think that that the statues, can do things or have any power. So it's, a very smart action by God's leave. Um, I'm gonna continue. 68. Profound miracle. They said, burn him and support your gods if this is what you decide to do. We said, O fire, be cool and safe for Abraham. And the footnote says, cool without and safe would have caused Abraham to freeze. 70. Thus they schemed against him, but we made them the losers. We saved him and we saved Lot to the land that we blessed for all the people. Okay, so here we see that Abraham's people decide to burn him, as a punishment for defying their gods. But God interferes. Because God's system is always to save, the believers. So He commands the fire to be cool and safe for Abraham. This miraculous act prevents Abraham from being harmed by the fire. As it mentioned in the footnotes, if the fire had only been cool without being safe, Abraham would have, be frozen. That's from God's mercy towards him. MashaAllah. 72. And we granted him Isaac and Jacob as a gift, and we made them both righteous. Abraham delivered all religious duties of Islam. We made them imams who guided in accordance with our commandments, and we taught them how to work righteousness and how to observe the contact prayers, salat, and the obligatory charity zakat. To us, they were devoted worshippers. The footnotes says, when the Quran was revealed, all religious duties were already established through Abraham to 128, 16, 123, 23, 22, 78. So in these two verses, God is telling us that, He blessed Abraham with two sons, Isaac and Jacob, whom He made both righteous. God appointed Isaac and Jacob as leaders, guiding others, according to His commandments. And He also taught them to do good things, righteousness, and to fulfill religious duties. As we see in the footnotes, that religious practices, including contact prayer and obligatory charity zakat, were established, during Abraham's time, reinforcing the idea of, continuity in religious teachings from Abraham to the revelation of Quran, not as, the traditional Muslim, belief that those, religious duties came with Prophet Muhammad, which is not true. 74, Lot. As for Lot, we granted him wisdom and knowledge, and we saved him from the community that practiced abominations. They were wicked and evil people. We admitted him into our mercy, for he was righteous. Noah. And before that, Noah called and we responded to him. We saved him and his family from the great disaster. So after the story of Abraham, and we see that God is continue to narrate for us, other messengers, as as we know, the surah of the verse is the prophets. So we see the story of Lot and Noah. Um, um, so here God gave Lot, wisdom and saved him from a wicked community, because he was righteous. Same thing with the Noah, he called upon God and God saved him and his family from a great disaster, showing, his mercy. And, like Abraham, Lot, and Noah, their story, they demonstrated the trusting in God's guidance and protection, and that teaches us that this can apply, to any believers sincere, devoting his worship to God alone. And there is a lot of, lesson that we can learn from the story of Abraham and the messengers. Um, the first thing is trusting God, even in adversity, time of adversities. Also being brave, when facing difficulties. Um, saying no to worshiping false gods and believing in one God instead. Also knowing that God's protection and help, um, is up, uh, towards, the sincere servants. Also, the importance of setting a good example for our children and for, future generation, as we see with the Prophet Abraham. God make his, children, righteous and leaders to guide in to God's message. Um, with that, I'm gonna end and stop here. And thank you for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free. Thank you.
MashaAllah, thank you, sister. What a beautiful Quran study.
MashaAllah. Thank you.
MashaAllah, thank you.
Just to reflect on some of the verses, I always like thinking of it from a perspective of like what it would have been like to be in a certain scenario. With Abraham, how he kind of fooled the judges or the leaders of the community. You know, not only did he have such a strong faith, especially in a time where it was completely the opposite, but such a strong,
I think we're having trouble hearing you, brother. Are you guys able to hear? Mashallah, I just want to comment on some of the verses that we read, especially the verses that talks a lot about Abraham. Like we see that I mean the Quran has so much detail on Abraham, right? And all the practices that were given to Abraham and how God taught him all these practices. Yet, when you look at the traditional Muslims or so-called Muslims, you can see their ignorance, how they have no knowledge, most of them, about what is in the Quran. Like, they think that the Salat was given to Muhammad and Muhammad bargained with God. Imagine Muhammad bargained with God, like God said, you have to do 100 prayers or 50 prayers, I forgot. 100 prayers, no, 100 prayers. And then Muhammad went up and down, and kept going, making trips and talking to other messengers, and messengers kept telling him to go and bargain with God for less and less until he kept, and he reduced, got them reduced for the people to five. What I mean, so such nonsense. But we know Quran is simple and straightforward verses that are telling us that they used to do their contact prayer, salat, they used to give zakat, all these things, and yet people have no clue about it. And another thing I wanted to comment on was, really love the verses about David and Solomon, and how they were glorifying God, like especially when it says here, um, we committed the mountains to serve David in glorifying God as well as the birds. And so we know that uh, all the psalms that God gave to David and how beautiful they are, in terms of how much wisdom is there and the beauty in which the praises of God have been expressed, and God's promise. Oh, we didn't read them yet. Oh, sorry, I went too far. Sorry, that was my fault. Okay, yeah, we read up till 76 and we're bad. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess just reverting back to the practices, the religious practices of Abraham, I think that's pretty significant. That because just yesterday I was in this other online discussion group with some people, and the traditional Muslims were like um, having this discussion where they were like hearing these things for the first time.
Uh,
Yeah, brother, we can hear you now.
I was questioning that. Yeah, it's. I was mentioning beforehand how it's amazing how Abraham came with such a faith, and yet like he wasn't given such a surety, kind of like Moses. Like Moses, he talked directly with God, right? Like he's the only messenger that God spoke to directly, right? But Abraham had such a faith and such a belief and such a steadfastness. Like he even when faced with death, he kind of made fools of the leaders of the community, right? Like it's always fascinating to see it from a perspective of even in today's day and form. Literally, he was ostracized from society, right? Like he was the odd man out, literally the black sheep. Like I would imagine a lot of people looked down on him, right? And he stuck to his guns, and it goes to show that not only was it a blessing that he received the prayers and and kind of how to practice religion, but also to set a good example for the future of what it is to be a submitter to God, right? It's truly beautiful.
Yeah, I think regarding the comment about God speaking to Adam, I think we only know from the Quran that God spoke to Moses directly, right? But as far as other messengers, like it wasn't like physically like hearing direct voice. Because, like for example, when you see verse 164, it specifically mentions Moses in Surah 4, verse 164. It says, "Messengers we have told you about, and messengers we never told you about." And God spoke to Moses directly. Um,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
mhm.
I was just wondering. Yeah, I've also so I had a question. There's a hadith or something that uh, where Abraham is asking God to uh, do less salah prayers.
No, not Abraham, Muhammad. They say
Oh, Muhammad.
they believe that Muhammad is the one who was given the religious practices of Islam, right? And
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and then they
Yeah,
say, "Oh, God commanded Muhammad to go down and tell his people that they have to pray 100 prayers." And then Muhammad goes down, and on his way down, he meets one of the messengers, like Moses or something, and he's talking to him. He's like, "Hey, God told me, that had that many prayers." He's like, "No, go back up, and my people did not do something or blah blah blah." I don't know what it was, but like then he goes back up again, talks to God and tries to bargain with him, and then he's doing less, and then he repeats that process multiple times, and
oh,
then
yeah,
going up and down, and then finally they both settle at five.
yeah. It's pretty wild because it's right there in the Quran. Like I think I don't know if I told somebody I'd worked with. He was from Lebanon like years ago, but I don't think I did because I don't think I really knew or maybe heard that part too much. But it said, did doesn't it? I mean, yeah, it says right there in the Quran how Abraham was given the contact prayers, and how he observed the contact prayers. So right there, that should tell him that they already existed. But yeah, I guess it also indicates just their severe worshiping of Muhammad to think he's like, I guess, special in that regard of getting the contact prayers first or something.
It's also like from the Christian belief, and like it shows that polytheism has this dressing up of being able to compromise or negotiate with God, right? Like it's completely contradictory. Like as we know, God knows everything before it even happens. But like in the hadith where it like you're saying that Muhammad negotiated with God, right? There's a common belief in Christianity and Judaism that Abraham, he negotiated with God of Sodom and Gomorrah, like don't blow up this town unless it was like 50 people or whatever, and then it came
Yeah,
down to just Lot's family,
hmm,
right?
exactly.
It's funny how there's this polytheist view of being able to negotiate, and it contradicts the Quran too, right? Like we're told, uh, God is never to be questioned. It is us who should be questioned, right?
Right.
God knows everything, right? So
Mm.
it's I guess it's a warning to see that these polytheists, it allows them to be compromisers in their own right, because they attribute these lies to the prophets and messengers of the past, that, oh well, if they could negotiate with God, then we can question too, right?
Right. Yeah, I always thought something was really off too, brother. About I never really liked it. It's like, why is Abraham sticking up for like these knowingly wicked people? And we understand from the Quran like he's extremely kind and clement, but the way they played it out in the Bible, I think it was in Genesis. Yeah, it's in Genesis. Like it was just not like Lot, Yeah, but it's not for the way they were. They built up the story or they fabricated it. But yeah, we have the Quran, so thank God we have the truth about this stuff.
Well, it goes to show, like God points out that it was a sin for Abraham to even pray for his father's forgiveness, right? And that's a far cry away from negotiating, right? Like that's like somebody trying to intercede on the behalf of somebody he knew full well that his father wasn't a good guy, right? But that's a far cry away from saying, oh, you should forgive, these thousands of people in this evil town that's corrupted, right? Like that's a completely different thing. Or transversely, like with the hadith of Prophet Muhammad, like, oh, maybe we should only pray 5 times a day versus the 100. Like if God tells you to do something, these messengers or prophets weren't people to just turn around and be like, I don't think that's a good idea. They were prominent men because they were the first ones to say, okay, whatever you say, I'll do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I believe the hadiths were saying 50 prayers, not 100, just to correct. And then, yeah, this was, they said Muhammad didn't question it, but then he went down, he saw Moses, and Moses said, no, argue with God and make it 5.
Yeah, that's a. But I mean, even if we had to do 50 prayers, like I think if the the Arabs or the whoever made that stuff up at the time, they wouldn't even, whoever invented that would, I don't know why they because I mean, even if that was a commandment, I mean that's
No, that's the whole idea, is just to make Muhammad, like, oh, the savior, like, oh,
mhm,
God is so cruel, he gave you 50, and then Muhammad is so kind, more merciful than God, he reduced it
right,
for
yeah, that's
idol
very true.
worship.
Thinking
Yeah.
about it, yep,
And that
that's
Muhammad had the ability to, you know, dictate any of this, like how,
right.
God
It's
be.
almost like it's sacrilegious. It's like, okay, why not just put Muhammad in? Why don't they just think of Muhammad being put in charge? Because if I mean, they're like trying to say decisions by our creator, not
Hmm.
correct.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
like,
it's
Muhammad is telling God what to do, again.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, there's a conspiracy, first of all, of Muhammad and Moses. You know what I mean? Like conspiring with each other,
hmm.
and then on top of it, it apparently God doesn't understand that there's a conspiracy. Like, so
Hmm.
now he's blind to this conversation. Like,
Hmm.
it's silly,
And
right?
also,
And
God
on
doesn't
top of that,
understand. I mean, also, God
oh
doesn't
god,
understand how many prayers people can do,
well, and
Like
it's
Muhammad has to tell him.
controversial. Oh god.
Hmm.
Right. Because I mean, that would even if that was true, it'd only be like 4 prayers an hour. I mean, you know, I think
Well,
like an awakened
and
day, but like the fact that they still would complain about that. I mean, we're here just for a short while, or they would make something up like that. Shows they probably don't even want to do the 5 prayers a day. They're only doing it because they feel like they have to. Maybe.
They do, yeah, it's a chore for people, right? When they do their salat, they just do it to show off. God says, like,
well, and it contradicts the meaning of the prayers. Like, God tells us, like, almost to counter this hadith. God says, like, what are you? Like, are you thanking the messenger for practicing the worship? Like, God gave you the prayers as a blessing, so that contradicts it. Like, Muhammad's trying to take away a blessing from you. You know what I mean? It's completely contradictory to the Quran.
hmm.
Completely contradictory to God.
Hmm.
Yeah, and verse 40, um, Sister Houda had mentioned, like, I think, I forget exactly what she said, but it was something like they're not about how, the time will come suddenly, to the disbelievers, and how they'll be met with, like, angst, or, um, it's just really, like, scary to even think. I mean, like, from their perspective too. And I mean, of course, we worry about the hour as well. We're reverent, but it's like, if you can just imagine, what it's going to be like on that day for these people. Um, uh,
It shows how blind these people were too. You know, God tells us explicitly many times, "Do not lie and attribute them to God." And then people make up these horrendous stories that are clearly contradictory to God's word, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, this is. Don't worry about anything else." It's shows how dumb, deaf, and blind, as God says, these people are.
yeah, it's. I think it's worse too. Like, if you, I was just thinking yesterday, I'd seen someone I know, or I met a few years ago. He shared a post, I guess expressing his disbelief, and in terms of just a completely different guy from, I think, the time I mentioned a few studies ago, but basically shared this, like, reel or something, saying good works won't get you in. Like, it was almost making a mockery. It was making a mockery of people who think, the way it was set up, this person was acting and, like, making faces, and they had the text on the screen like, good works won't get you into heaven. Do not judge because we've all falling short, blah blah blah, or it's a sin and all that. And I think it's worse, or it's more repulsive to me. Like, for people, for it's one thing for people just to believe that stuff and, like, stay quiet about it, and try to figure out, or just go in life. I mean, that's still bad, you know. But it's another thing. It's like twice as worse if they believe that stuff and they're promoting it, because they're it's what you just said, Justin. It's like they're attributing lies to God. So not only do they believe it right in their hearts, but they go and spread it like they're so sure about it. And I think it's a display of their arrogance and their ego. Because I guess it maybe someone has a comment on this, but it's like when there's a verse uh, that says retribution will be doubled for them, for these people specifically, because they sit there and they boast about, or they promote this message, they attribute lies to God, right? Instead of, you got other people out there that I've met, which really aren't as bad. I mean, it's still bad that they believe this stuff, but they're very quiet about it. They just go through life. I mean, hopefully they can find guidance, but they're not like promoting just this falsehood, or these ideas. So, um, yeah, that's all I had to say.
I think the point of, like, not judging is, understanding that everybody has faults, but if there's a striving towards being better and accepting the fact that they're wrong, right? Like, that's a person that you shouldn't judge. I don't think, right? Like, we all have faults, and we're all better. But if they're actively going against, and you prove it to them, you point it out to them, and they're still stuck in their defiance, still stuck in their disbelief, and they're blind to what the truth is, then ultimately that's their decision, and that's their choice to be disbelievers and misguided, right? That's when judgment, it's like, Dr. Rashad Khalifa, he even said, he was like, run away from those people, man. Which is true, because, like, if you thought about it, and, like, even the Quran says, they've looked at it and then they frowned, right? Like, they didn't like what they were hearing, they didn't like the truth of the matter. Well, if that be the case, that's just an arrogant person, right? Run away from that person. That's not a good person.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can judge. I mean, what people, I think, people don't want to judge, fear being judged because it's can make them, I guess, uncomfortable. But I think what's not correct is, self righteous, like you're judging somebody that something you could be guilty of or something like that, like hypocritical judgment. That's what people I guess from the traditional sense fear. But yeah, I mean, we have the Quran. I mean, we can judge by to protect ourselves. I mean, we make judgments every day. I think their understanding of what judgment actually is a little skewed. So I think that's where. But I mean, it's still the fact still remains that, I mean, they're promoting stuff like I've just, I don't know, I'm seeing it more recently, but just talking people into like having no hope basically, and living a righteous life. I was just listening to a study the other day, and actually made me a little alarm in my phone. I'll read it. Just for a reminder, but I think it's in the December 24th, 1982 sermon. But I mean, so we have the messenger. I mean, he's talking about if we sin, we will pay, right? So it's like that when they say, "Oh, you can't, don't bother doing righteous works; it can't save you." I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And we also have continuously repent. And then what I like the most is Rashad. I mean, he was explaining. He said, a quote: "It is in your hands to commit a sin or not." So I mean, after you repent, I mean, you can. I'm not saying like. I mean, yes, we can fall and we'll fall into sin again, but we have to go with the mindset of really being a perfect human being, like from each point of repentance on, and God will help us. But I think this is something like Satan's one of his really effective baits, where he gets people. I think he preys on people's laziness and apathy to not want to strive to do this stuff because it's not easy at all, right? It takes a lot of strength and growing of the soul, but it eventually. I mean, like the messenger said. I mean, he's God's appointed messenger. I mean, he said God can bring you to a point of being um, being close to perfect or something like that. And when he mentioned it is in your hands to commit a sin or not, I mean that's basically what we see throughout the Quran. So if people were to actually um, want to work hard instead of taking cop outs, and like just mindlessly hoping that some person can intercede for them, whether it's Muhammad or Jesus or whoever, then they would actually, I think they would have a much better results.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always quite like. I've really puzzled over is the Quran kind of makes it two ways. He refers to following him as being the hard path, and then he also refers to it as the easy path. And I've thought about that like for quite some time. And I think what it is like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what it is it's us fighting ourselves that's difficult. And once we fully submit and understand that like God is our God, like our leader, our life, like we don't have those thoughts. We don't have that fight anymore where we just fully submit, then it's easy, right? But it is something that I've always puzzled over when I read it, where kind of God says, it's the hard path, right? It's the freeing of the slaves, the giving of charity, the prayers, and all that fun stuff. And then it says you should also choose the easy path, like another different time in the Quran. And I've always looked at the meaning of that and tried to understand it. And I think that's where it kind of comes from is the fact that you just
Which
submit to
verse are
it.
you referring to, brother, about the easy path?
Do you know what? God willing, I will look at it right now. But I do know there's two parts. There's a part where it says you should pick the easy path, and then it also like there's another verse where it says you should pick the hard path, and there's like kind of that duality. But well, God
The,
willing, I'll look for the verse.
the verse I think the verse you're thinking of, it said we will direct you to the easiest path. Uh, yeah, the other verse I think you're talking about in another part of the Quran. Um, it says, yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head. But I just remembered it said, you shall choose the difficult path. And I think it goes on to say, uh, you shall choose the difficult path. And it talks about strategy and stuff. But I mean, the way I look at the easiest path, in that, in a sense, is like it's, and it becomes easier. Like it's the easiest, like life gets better in the sense that you're not going to be in Satan's kingdom, suffering and miserable like a lot of people are in this earth, and you're going to be on the path to, I guess, success and redemption. When the regarding the verse that says you'll direct you to the easiest path.
You're correct, brother. 87:8 would be we will direct you to the easiest path. And then, do you know what? I think the answer is right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, you should choose the hard
Mm-hmm.
path, but God guides you on the easy
Mm-hmm.
path, right? Like, so it's submitting to the difficulty, and then God makes life easy for you.
Yeah, exactly. God makes, I mean, the path in reality is difficult, right? I mean, keeping track of 5 prayers even daily, right, is every single day of your life is like on the outside is difficult, and giving to charity in hard times is difficult. But the person who reverences God, God says He'll open up His chest wide open to submission, right? And someone who is destined to fail, I mean, He will make it difficult for him, like someone climbing up on a peak with lack of oxygen and all that. So like that shows like when God, it's like something that's really hard. Let's say like something. Let's give you an example of something really difficult. Like let's say I don't want to say calculus, but let's say like like some rocket science. Like I don't know. Think about like nuclear uh, chemistry or something, right? And someone is really able to pick it up, even though it's a hard thing, but someone can excel at it, by God's leave. So God makes it easy for them. Like how sometimes we do things that are tough, but God makes them easy for us. And so this is what I feel that God is telling us. If we reverence God, we worship Him, we remind ourselves, God will make everything easy for us. The things that are supposed to be tempting for us will get less tempting. The things that are supposed to be look more like daunting task, like you know anything related to our submission, will become easier for us. Like, and also I think one example that comes to my mind is, when people went to war during the battle, I think it was the Battle of Badr, I believe, where the people were, shown to them in their dream as if they were fewer in number, so they were encouraged to fight, because they were given more confidence. God made the enemy look fewer in their eyes, made the work look easier, made the effort, made that striving look easier for them than it actually was.
Mashallah. Actually, now that I've kind of read the verses, there was an analogy like in this worldly life that I explained to my son, and God willing, you tell me if it's correct. A homeless guy, being homeless, it's quite an easy path to get there, right? You don't have to do anything. You have no responsibility. You just care about yourself. You know what I mean? You care about the impulses of what you want at that moment, every moment, right? It's very
Mm-hmm.
easy. But ultimately, that's a very difficult life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
Alternatively,
true.
or you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Alternatively, if you choose to have those responsibilities, if you choose to do the work, if you choose to strive,
Mm-hmm. You have
right?
happiness.
It's much easier, right? So which life, like, so it's the act of choosing the difficulty, the responsibility, the striving of God, and God blesses you by having an easy path. Maybe God willing, that's kind of the analogy. Would you agree with that, brother?
Yeah, mashallah, that's also another way of looking at it. Both of them are correct, I think they both apply in this case. Like, you have both have the easy life, obviously, like it's like you preparing now for your hereafter. You may also look at it this way, like it's like you have the difficult path, you are doing all these things, but that's going to give you an easy life. It's like you kept saving money during the hard times. Now, life is easy. Now you're retired. Now you're, just having fun. Using that money, like just allegorically speaking. In your retirement time. So
Yeah, mashallah. And it kind of goes to show too, like circling back with Abraham, right? Nothing about his life was easy, right? Like he had a very he chose to do difficult things, but even in those difficulties, God made it easy for him, right? Like, oh my gosh, could you imagine, like being set forth in front of your community and thrown into a furnace, right? And
hmm
yet God made it easy for him, like
hmm
God guided him a way out, and then in the end he had a beautiful life, right? He had a beautiful lineage. Um, he was set as an example for the future generations. Like everything that Abraham asked for, um, was kind of granted to him through the grace of God. Like to be set as an example and to have all this land and to kind of be the forefather of submission, right? But his priorities were right. He chose the difficult path, and God made it easy for him, right? So yeah, it kind of full circle there.
yeah, I mean, being a submitter to God alone, generally speaking, it's not easy, right? Although if it was easy, I mean, and the Bible says that also in this one verse, right, where it says the path to hell is wide and what is it? I'm paraphrasing, right? But the path to heaven is narrow. John, you know, right?
Yeah, straight and narrow.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, straight and
Yeah,
narrow, and the path to hell is wide and open.
yeah. So generally
Yeah,
speaking, it's difficult to be a submitter in this world. I mean, you're swimming against the current, and most people are going to hell, right? So you know that you're the minority of the minority. People who are extremely fortunate and blessed by God that He guides them through these paths. It's like a very, very tough place to get to, heaven. But God has given you the roadmap, and He's guiding you through it to making it easy for you, right? If you didn't have that guidance and roadmap from God, it would be very, very difficult.
I got a question, just to go towards this. Is it us who makes it difficult? Because like God constantly tells us in the Quran, He's like, "I'm trying to make this easy for you." You know what I mean? Like He constantly says, "I'm trying to make this easy for you. I don't want to put any hardship on you." Like God, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, right? But God constantly tells us in the Quran, like how He's trying to make things easy for you, trying to make things easy. So if God's telling us that that like He's trying to do everything He can to make it easy for us. Yet it's the decision that's difficult because we should decide. We should decide to take the difficult path. Well, is it
Mhm.
just us who makes it difficult then?
Well, I mean, I have another comment on this. It's like I think, and I know what you're saying, brother, but like I think one thing that someone had told me a few times, and I was very annoyed by it, but then eventually it stuck with me, And so it's like every time someone says God is trying to do something, it's like trying to do something. It's like He's trying, but He's not good at it, like it's not working. It kind of gives that idea, like God, He's trying,
May God
like we
forgive me,
try.
brother.
Yeah.
You're right on that. You're right on that.
Yeah, so it's like
100%.
God has already laid out the plan, and He has a system we have to follow. Now we are the ones trying to get redemption, right? We can try, but God can do anything. If He wants, He's in the blink of an eye, all of us will be in the highest heaven, right? But that's not the idea. But God has laid out everything. He has given it to us on a silver platter. Like, just have to follow it. It's like it's my system that I have put you to you as a horse. I have brought you to the pond. Now it's your job to drink. I can put the water in your mouth, but that's not the system.
For sure. First of all, brother, thank you for giving me that perspective. It reminded me of the verse in the
Hmm.
Quran where it says, "Those who say God's hand is held." That's kind of alluding to
Hmm.
what it means, right? And yeah,
Hmm.
may God forgive me. I didn't mean it in that way by any means,
Hmm.
but you're
Mashallah.
right. We shouldn't speak like that.
Yeah, mashallah. You know, it's, yes, this is something we have to face every day. I don't know if it was YouTube or not. I heard maybe in the audio, but it was a good point that was brought up. It's, you know, tomatoes were uh, most of the people, like 99% of the people were around, and things were exposed to. I mean, be it the TV or whatever, or I mean, at a restaurant or a grocery store, or just in general, the radio, or just people in general. It's I mean, it's going against the grain. You know,
Yeah,
taking
actually, brother
message is
Joe,
just like super
we
prevalent.
can't we can barely hear you. I think the $20 headsets are not good.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
That it passed the 20-minute warranty period.
oh man, I was feeling good about. Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't have brought up the price though, but yeah, I think it kind of gets muffled, you know. Uh, maybe it's the angle at which you are sitting, or I don't know. But it was clear earlier.
To continue on to the conversation though, like in 65:4, God says, like, and this isn't the whole verse, but it says, "Anyone who reverences God, He makes everything easy for him." So it's the action of reverence that is difficult. But once that is done, so it is our action that we make difficult, but then God makes our life easier as a result, right? Um, so where I misspoke, you know what I mean? Like, I hope you understand where I'm going with that. God willing.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can also hear the noise machinery behind you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just gonna comment. Yeah, on the reverence part, it's very true. That's what. That's probably the biggest player for me to. What's made things easy for me, like when I, like, or not even tempted with things anymore. Most people are, you know, you're around, going to, you know, dealing with different people. It's that reverence that and appreciation of God that makes it easy to not, you know, or not mess up or not want to mess up either.
Yeah, mashallah, 100%, brother. It's difficult in a way, but life, like God definitely, like even brother Suleiman, he asked me at the starting when we were just getting started, "How are you doing?" And I says, "Thank God. God has made life very very good. Like it's been good to me. You know what I mean. That being said, um, there's work involved, right? And I think we just attribute that to difficulty. But in alternatively, if you were to be lazy about it, it would be much worse. I think you know what I mean. You see a lot of rich people who are very sad. You know what I mean, or a lot of people who prioritize this life, and it's extremely difficult to live like that. You know what I mean? Like always worrying about everything around you. When you submit to God, you only worry about your soul. You know what I mean? Like everything else is way out there. It doesn't bother you. You know what I mean? So maybe that's where there's that difference. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, because the submitter knows like if you commit a sin, you have to pay. They reverence God because they know His system is. They don't take it for granted. I mean, you can see why like the disbeliever or idol worshiper, um, they don't have any reverence because they don't they don't think or think believe in God or know God is who He is. Because I mean, we also have that in the Quran. He's the most merciful, the most gracious, but He's also strict in enforcing retribution. And I mean, even then, it's like even if we have to pay for something, it usually really should be a lot worse. But God is so merciful, so like a pinch or something, is we think sometimes, like the messenger put it, we think it's out of proportion, but really it's not. It's it's not because I think people. I mean, non-submitters, like people who are non-submitters, tend to abuse this about God, like His merciful traits, and so much to this extent that they take it to the extreme, as I guess with the Mohammedans and Christians and whoever else.
Yeah, mashallah. That's like verse 30 out of Surah 42, where God says, "Anything bad that happens to you is a consequence of your own deeds," and He overlooks many. You know what I mean? So it's not like if we get a pinch or something like that, it's because there's been many things. You know what I mean? Many things going on, not just not here or there, but like it's easy for us to get down on ourselves and think, you know, think that life is so difficult, but God's just trying to just steer us in the right direction, right?
Hmm.
By His
You said
grace.
again. You said again. God is trying to steer.
Uh, my apologies, brother, and thank you so much. Do you know what? Thank God I have such a good community to steer me in the right direction.
Suleiman's good. He doesn't miss a thing.
Hey, man,
Thank
that's
God.
what we need. That's what we need.
Thank
That's why
God.
we have a community like this. Yeah, God willing, I'll get that out of my vocabulary. 100%.
Yeah, I remember when he mentioned one of the people who left, and he said he named the person and said is the most pathetic thing. Person, and we know what happened. Picked up on that right away. Just kidding.
No, mashallah,
Hmm.
it shows the reverence, right? It shows the reverence. Like we have to be very. I think you're correct on that, brother. Like we have to be very
Yeah, I'll do
cognizant of
this.
what we say,
Yeah,
even if it's passive.
I do the same. I'll do the same if you make spelling mistakes, or grammatical mistakes.
Hey, do you know what? That's well, it's the only gift we really have in communication is what we say, and if we say
Hmm.
things wrong, that
Hmm.
that's not good.
I'm just
So,
kidding.
ah,
I'm just kidding. Yeah,
I
but
believe there's truth in
Jaffer
it.
Jaffer knows that. Jaffer knows that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way, we were talking the other day about the Jays. We don't have Jack today, but we have Jaffer. You know,
Yeah, but
I
he's a
don't
cheater.
technically
He
we
has
can
a
still
C.
count him as a J. Mashallah.
He wanted to spell his name like a cool guy, not like us
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of times, when things happen, like, a lot of times we may feel also that, things are pinches. They could also be more like purification, process, like us, objecting and losing our patience and or getting anxious and getting worried, as Mashallah Huda read the verse about human being is impatient by nature, right? The first verse we read, it says, God says, I will inevitably show you my signs, do not be in such a hurry. So the human being is impatient by nature, and I think that's one thing. I think Brother Justin, you had also said the other day that was one thing. You feel we can be weak sometimes, and it's a human trait. We're all always struggling with that in life, and things happen, and we want things, now than later, and but God wants us to have patience in life, and developing patience obviously, is something that is not gonna uh, come to us unless we are put through those situations where we have to exercise it. God says your patience is only attainable by God's help. And patience doesn't come easy, and it only comes when you are put through those situations where you have to be patient. And you just have to go through it until you can say that you can perfect yourself. And as the messenger says, and then you come out as a polished gem at the end of it all. So
Yeah, very true.
MashaAllah, God even says numerous times in the Quran how impatient we are. The human being is impatient by nature, right? And I think that's part of the test too, is just kind of overcoming that and striving to be patient, right, through God's grace.
Yeah, I mean, even amongst the, I guess, I don't know if I call them disbelievers, but I know a lot of the philosophers and or the old days, like Marcus Aurelius and Aristotle, and one of them said patience is the most supreme virtue, because I think it's like the hardest, one of the most difficult things to have.
yeah, and there's a verse in the Quran that says patience and forgiveness reflects the true strength of character.
MashaAllah. Yep, there you go.
I think it also it continues, if I'm correct, where it says, but this can only be achieved by like the fortunate, or like it's a very difficult thing to achieve, right?
Yeah, it
So,
says your patience is only attainable with God's help.
yeah. So by God's grace, like, well, what a blessing that would be to attain, right? So it's a good thing to strive for sure. This is a question I have, just as a side topic, if we're okay with it, brothers. I don't know if it's that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so uh, God says, that the human being often prays for something that may hurt them, right? Um, uh, how do we distinguish? Like, my question is like, like when should we limit ourselves from praying for something that's difficult? Is this something that we just pray for, or like is there kind of a law or a guidance in any way?
Well, I mean, mashallah, that's a good question. I think that we may pray for things that may hurt him, but and God says like sometimes we think things are good for us, but they're bad for us. Sometimes we think things are bad for us, but they may be good for us. The thing is, we don't know. Like it's not always clear. For example, like it's like the blessings in disguise, right? Like the person who was in the boat, the guiding teacher with Moses, he drew a hole in it, bore a hole in it, because the king was confiscating the ship. Now that person has no way of knowing for a fact at that time, like God's wisdom behind it. So he may pray to God that his ship sails safely through this journey, and then there's a hole at the end of it, right?
Yeah, he probably
And
wasn't too happy when he found that hole. That's for
yeah,
sure.
right. Yeah. So yeah, mashallah, reminds me I was visiting someone, and as soon as I started my journey, I had an accident, and there was a hole in front of my car. Literally, it has this thing, the trailer that pulls the vehicles and stuff. It's protruding out at the back of those trucks, and that whole thing like went into the bumper in the front, and there's like a hole in it, like really like a round hole, in my car, and it just reminds me of that every time I look at it. Like, but yeah, I mean, so like sometimes there's no right, like we can't tell, right? But God knows, obviously, and He knows based on those circumstances, things are, He knows our nature. He knows what's good for us, what's bad for us, things that we can handle, things that we can't handle. So, but obviously, I mean, we shouldn't ask God for things that are bad, right? Like, we shouldn't ask God for things that we know could be bad. But the things that we don't know, um, like maybe asking God for something material that we may want, it's okay. I mean, as long as you're not breaking any of God's commandments. But God knows, and He gives us things accordingly. And then I think it's reminded me of this country song. It says, one of God's blessings is like unanswered prayers or something like that. Um,
Yeah, I always pray for
yeah. Hmm.
some of my prayers before have been like for me to pray for the right things, and
Hmm.
like I find myself like
Yeah.
recently one of my requests during Ramadan was just like more I guess strength and like internal strength to grow and um,
Hmm.
to be forgiven,
Yeah.
because I think we can make that's where we can make special requests during Ramadan, right? Because I
Hmm.
made one like last Ramadan night of Destiny. I made one and it actually kind of came true. Like over the uh, I guess like with some of the things I was
Hmm.
going through and like things like overcame. I guess
Hmm.
like huge parts of my uh, I guess you'd say ego in the sense of like worrying about what people think and
Hmm.
social pressure. Like it's completely gone. I mean, I
Hmm.
know I talked to you about one
Mashallah.
of them and something you had kind of helped me with and encouraged me. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
doing contact prayers and anywhere in public, like at the airports, I
Hmm.
actually enjoy them now. Like, there's people like I mean, I go off into a corner, like they're not running into me, but I mean, there's like 100
Hmm.
people around me, and then
Hmm.
it's like I just enjoy it now because it's I just that, that was like one of my requests, like
Hmm.
mentioned, Alhamdulillah, like it was definitely like something really uh,
Hmm.
self-reflecting, because like when you look within yourself and I ask myself, okay,
Hmm.
why am I like when I first started out, why am I not feeling like I want to do this? And then immediately I got really scared, like if I said if I can't do this, like you're not a submitter, and I mean you can really go to hell because I mean that's it's something. I don't think it's like some people might, oh, that's you're overthinking it or you're not going to go to hell.
Hmm.
But I mean, if you think about it, that's something that needs to be fixed in me, right?
Hmm.
And it's something very
Yeah.
serious, and it's part of like what you're saying, a purification process. Like with that's what I've noticed too. Like
Yeah.
with like pinches or like reminders and stuff. It's really for me. It's been like really the cleaning process of and purifying. You know, mashallah.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder, brother, to not soft sell it, right? Like what's truly at risk is our eternal souls, right? It's not something trivial. It's not something where you can negotiate, right? So having that perspective, I think that's always a good reminder for anybody, right? That the only thing trivial about this life is what we decide to focus our time with, right? So, mashallah, thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, I think another thing we can do is, when we're asking God for something and we're not sure if it's good for us or not, we can always ask God to give this thing to us if it's good for us.
Mashallah. Yeah,
You know?
that's
Hmm.
amazing. That's good.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
So,
since like God willing, mashallah. I didn't think
s-
about that.
so like to kind of recontextualize, like, are you referring to like more like traits instead of actual materialistic things? Like, it would be more better for guiding me to
No,
strive or.
traits are always good, right? Like for example, if you say, "Well, God make me more patient if it's good for me," but I mean, being more patient is always good for you. But I'm talking about things of this world. Like, let's say, you have a job interview, and you don't want to say, God, give me this job because maybe it might be a blessing that you don't get that job. Maybe you get something better. You can say, well, please, God, help me with this if it's good for me, you know, or guide me to something that's better. Otherwise, something like that. But just know. But just, I mean, it doesn't. You still not. I mean, hurting yourself if you ask God for something in general. That, I mean, you're not committing a sin if you're asking God for something that's not bad inherently. Like getting a job at any company, let's say, is not going to hurt you. But if that job is not good for you and there's a better one out there for you, God will give it to you anyways, right? But I
I,
think the important point is that we are worshiping God when we're imploring Him, and that's what counts for us, As long as you're not asking forgiveness for an idol worshiper or something like that, which you can't do. We can ask God for anything, the messenger says. Footnote.
so
And even say God likes that because it's also a testament to our faith and belief that God is the only one who can give us something. Like give me a new upgraded laptop or something or a cell phone
Yeah.
and help me in the decision process to buying the best one. Let's say because if I wanted to use some software to do something for submission or make I don't know an image or I don't know you know but
Hmm.
yeah, we bear witness that he can only give us our money and our job and stuff.
Hmm.
this reminds me of like a verse in the Quran where it's like, don't be happy of what you get or not get. Everything is willed by God, right? Like
Hmm.
obviously I'm paraphrasing. So
Hmm.
w- does that mean like ultimately the biggest test is to just once you've accepted submission, once you've accepted God as being the chief of your life, right? Um, just simply like not worrying about anything else is that like the biggest test is like you just reverence God and then whatever else happens in your life you just accept it as being God's will, like is that kind of like the ultimate goal essentially, like here on this earth, I mean.
I mean, I don't know if I would say it's the biggest test, but it's definitely part of your test, right? To uh, not get too excited or to despair or anything like that. Knowing that God is running everything, sever your dependence on anything or anyone, right? To be happy under all circumstances, submit to God under all circumstances. It just reminds me of like one of the studies where the Master of the Covenant was explaining, like it says you even imagine like everybody around you is dying, or something like that. I think he said, and but it says you still be happy, you know. And I was once in that situation. I felt like things were around me were seemingly pretty bad, very bad, and I felt but for some reason I felt very happy, inside, because those things didn't phase me. I was happy because I made the right choices, and the things that seemed bad were just temporary, side effects that were blessings in disguise. And so I was very happy, someone observed, my demeanor, and they said, I was a psychopath. Because that's the trait of a psychopath. But really, that's the reality. The messenger says people around you could be dying. I think he gave the example of Tucson, like, or something. It's like everybody's, let's say there is something happens in Tucson, everybody's dying or something, and says, but you will be perfectly happy.
So ultimately, like, i- is it trivial to ask for anything material, considering God will give you what you need, and then anything else
Asking
we
God
just
for
accept
anything
it?
is a asking God for anything is a form of worship. Like, you should ask God for stuff. Like, it's a way for you to remember God, right? So if you need things, don't. I wouldn't be like, well, God will just give it to me. I don't have to ask. I would ask God, because asking God shows that I believe in God. I believe it comes from Him, and it's just a way of me worshiping Him. I mean, if you think you don't need it, that's one thing. But if you need something, you want something, you can ask God for it. Like, I think it's a way of us showing our, humility and love for God, also at the same time, that He's the one in control. He's our provider. We're acknowledging that when we're doing that. As an exercise, I think it's a good thing. If you want something, need something, ask God. It's a way for you to communicate with God. Like, He talks about, and thanking Him equally, when things are going right, when things are going your way. Like, He gives the example of, like, when you were driving on the road and the light turned green. Did you thank God for it? Like, was God your God at that time? So similarly, like, as you're thinking about these situations, about the things you need, just thinking about that you need them is one thing, but to implore God to give you that thing, I think at that time, just kind of, makes it into a moment for you to worship God.
Yeah, and if our intentions are good for what we're asking, like if I ask for more materials and sort of something to use to in God's cause, I think I think that
Yeah, like, for
that's
example,
good.
like, if I ask God to give John better headphones so he can enjoy Zikr, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
And we can hear him better.
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
That's awesome. Yeah, crazy.
Mashallah.
Mashallah.
Well, that being said, brother, in 14 minutes, you got to sign off. I wanted to remind you as a hard stop.
Oh, mashallah, thank you, brother. Yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah, I actually have to in about 15 minutes, God willing, yes.
Just wanted to clarify because we're getting close, and I know you have
Uh-huh.
time dyslexia. You know.
Yeah, yes, yes, inshallah. So, yeah, I mean, if there are no other comments or questions, God willing, we can end, now, or we can end in a couple of minutes, either way. But yeah, if there are no comments, then we can conclude now.
Well, for concluding, I just want to thank you, Sister Huda,
Oh,
your beautiful wife, for leading such a wonderful Quran study, and yeah, it's always a pleasure to meet midweek with you guys. Thank God.
mashallah, thank God for
Mashallah.
these studies. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Huda, for leading the study. And God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless. Salam alaikum.